Welcome to the New Wealth Wave podcast, hosted by Dr. Joaquin Wallace. We're diving deep into the intricate layers of the 7-stage generational wealth model to offer invaluable insights on legacy building, wealth accumulation and preservation, and financial growth across generations. I'm Dr. Joaquin Wallace, and this is the New Wealth Wave podcast.
Hey, future wealth builders. This is Dr. Joaquin Wallace, and thank you for joining me this year on the New Wealth Wave podcast. Guess what? We started this podcast January of 2024, and we are at the final month of the year. Wow, time flies. Each quarter, we provide for you a summary of some of the best episodes within that quarter itself. So we have to do the same thing. We're in quarter 4, and we're going to provide for you some of the best episodes of quarter 4. Hope you enjoyed them. Take a listen. And to help lead the discussion will be Nate Astle. Nate Astle is a marriage and family therapist and a certified financial therapist, and is the founder of the Financial Therapy Clinical Institute. He specializes in couples with financial conflict, financial trauma, and shifting financial behavior patterns. Nate, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. This will be fun.
Before you became who you are today, this individual that has a loud voice in this space of financial trauma and therapy, where were you located on the model?
Step 1, honestly, before I knew what financial therapy and all that was, I was just like any other human where I was on autopilot with so many things. I went to school to get my master's degree in couples and family therapy. I knew I wanted to be a therapist. I knew I wanted to help couples specifically was always the interest point. A lot of reasons for that was my parents' conflict and how that affected me as a kid. My parents fought a lot, and I had a lot of unfortunately negative responses to that, some traumas and beliefs about myself that I had internalized. And it wasn't until I was in grad school and happened to be at the right place in the right time where I learned about financial therapy at Kansas State University that I realized so much of my struggles and so much of my automatic responses and things were about my parents' conflict about money. That was a huge driver of my own financial behaviors, but it was also a huge driver in how I viewed what money is and what it's supposed to do. Shame is the enemy of change. If I do not see myself as inherently valuable, as inherently good, as inherently worthy of change, my motivation and my likelihood of actually following through on a plan to make a change significantly diminished. Shame keeps us stuck. And so the antithesis of shame is self-compassion in my mind. And shame thrives in isolation, and it dies when it is told in safe places. So if we can make our relationships safe to talk about money, and we can make our internal dialogue, our own internal voice, a compassionate one, that is 90% of the battle. It really is. You can work with therapists, you can work with planners and counselors, you can work through all these stages so much better if we can break through the shame and break through the harshness that we so often treat ourselves. And quite honestly, we would never say to other people what we say to us. So if we can be intentional about that, you have a much better shot of actually making wealth and money a part of you. There's no sustainable budget that doesn't have room for fun. We get into restriction, and that's often what people associate budgeting with, is restricting or like dieting, right? Saving is a need, fun is a need, and some financial planners will use things like, we don't call it a budget, we call it a spending plan. That's great. I'm planning to spend my money. And honestly, in the end, money is just a thing that we deal with in this life, but it's just a means to an end. Like, it provides safety, or it provides stability, it provides joy, it provides the opportunity to have a shared experience on a vacation. And if we get too caught up on being smart with money that we forget the why, I genuinely think you're gonna end up with a lot of regret. At the end of your life, on your deathbed, you're probably not going to be thinking about, thank goodness I stayed within my budget in June of 2024. You're gonna be thinking about your friends and your family and the people that are most meaningful to you.
To lead the discussion will be Brian Seymour, who is the principal and founder of Prosperity Wealth, a fee-only RIA dedicated to closing the racial gap by helping African-American professionals make intelligent money decisions through unbiased financial advice. I love that. What trends are you seeing that give you hope that historically more marginalized communities are finally being included in the financial industry?
Yeah, I think that we are doing better. I think that there are a lot of institutions that have made pledges, and some of them are actually putting a little money behind increasing the diversity of their workforce. Black women, honestly. Whether it's the elections, the House, or the financial services industry, Black women are just making tremendous strides. They are becoming CFPs, although we're still less than 2%. And so it's nice to be able to get around and to see other advisors that are successful, that are doing great, that you can brainstorm with, that you can workshop and just lean on for support. So I am encouraged. And honestly, I think social media will help. I think that when we can show that it's a possibility and Black people find out that they can do it, we tend to show up and excel. I'm excited about the future diversity of the industry. I think that you've done such a great job of providing a model for us to use to help navigate. Like I said, we don't come from lots of money. A couple of generations, it was illegal for us to own property. And so to have a map to understand why some of the things are the way that they are, I feel like is so important. And go back and listen to the other episodes. There is a wealth of knowledge that you will be able to get from each and every person. And I mean, you got to remember, I don't mean to keep throwing it back and keep talking historically, but this is knowledge that we were not even allowed to have. These were conversations that were had in rooms that we weren't allowed to be in. This is amazing information that is out there. And like you said before, ignorance is not an excuse anymore. The information is out there. It's about whether we are willing to go out and get it. And so I would encourage all the listeners the same way that I do to keep being thirsty for the knowledge, to keep seeking out sources like this where you can better yourself and better your future and better your community. I think that capitalist society do a really good job of making you think that you're supposed to work. You're supposed to work. And the greatest compliment that I ever got from a client is he said, Brian, I owe you the world. Because if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have retired. I would have kept listening to those guys who were telling me to keep saving and keep working and keep investing. And so financial freedom is not just having enough money. There are plenty of people that have money, have enough, have reached their goal and don't realize it. They're still trapped. Like the elephants, right? Like in the zoo, you nail them down on a little stake when they're just a little elephant. And then when they're giant monsters and they can rip that thing up and go, they're so conditioned to say, oh no, this is keeping me here, but they stay. And so many people are like that. Financial freedom is the ability to do what you want, when you want with your time. And, for some people, it's not much. My dad reminds me all the time. He's like, hey, if I hit the lottery for like 100,000, 200,000, he's like, you're going to thought I was a billionaire. He's like, because I don't have a lot of debt. I take care of these couple things. I don't want a lot. I'm going to love and enjoy my life. And there's other people that want it all. And so financial freedom is not a number. It is the ability not only to be able to, but to realize if you're working, it's because it's optional, that you are able to do all of the things that you need to do and all of the things that you want to do.
To lead the discussion would be Anmol Singh. Welcome to the show, Anmol.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to chatting with you.
Trader, investor, and author of Prepping for Success, Anmol Singh knows all about riding the emotional roller coaster of the stock market. The difference between the profit and losses often comes down to understanding how to make logical, fast decisions based on constantly changing data.
The number one thing is to not look at this sort of big mountain of goal that you want to climb, right? You want to kind of backtrack it. So the first thing I tell people is take a financial inventory. If money was not a problem, what would your ideal life look like? At that point, you want to assign everything a number. Okay, for me to be financially free, let's say if I had my rent covered or mortgage covered, what I need to live comfortably, right, is covered. Then you put a number to it. Maybe whatever that, maybe it's 300,000 a year, 500,000 a year, maybe it's $1 million a year. Whatever that number comes down for you, now you want to backtrack it. Okay, so for me to get to that number in the next 20 years, assuming I get 10% return on my investment, how much do I need to have invested in it now? And that allows you to determine how much to invest, right? And then assuming you're going to add monthly contributions, there's a lot of calculators online. The compounding calculator, if you put in, what if I started investing today with $1,000 and I put in, $100 a month? And if I get 10% return a year, what does my money look like in 10 years? So then now okay, at 10 years, you're going to have this X amount. Now that X amount is different from your goal target that you had set, then you know you need to either increase the monthly contribution or the starting account size. So then you know that you're going to get there 10 years from later. So you want to backtrack that number, have the big goal, and then break it down. If our parents never invested, if there was no talk on the dinner table about the markets or investing or how we have our money work for us, so our money beliefs have already been programmed in a way that even if you get the literacy, but if your money beliefs is keep pulling you back, well, the stock market is gambling. I heard my parents used to say that. Then we still have those beliefs holding us back from actually taking action on the literacy. Because you can learn all the best strategies in the world, but if you never implement it, then that typically, I think, has to go back to the root causes of what do we truly believe about money? And as you mentioned, people believe, financial system's a scam or all those things. But I think that's where the literacy ties into on, okay, what are the markets done over the last 10 years? How does it actually work? Let's break down the numbers. And then more importantly, let's do a deep dive internal inventory of ourselves. What do I truly believe about the market? Where do those beliefs come from? Who planted those beliefs in us, right? And why do we not take action on something that's been proven over the last 10 years? So yeah, I think, inclusion, all of those things kind of come together. It's almost like, it's a wheel. If one part of the wheel is broken, then even if you have the other parts, the wheel's not going to connect. So I think all of those things tie together to create sort of like a financial sustainable future. For me, my definition of success has changed and evolved over time. When I didn't have any money, making a lot of money was success, right? But then you make the money and then you're like, okay, if you make all the money, but if your health is a mess, is that really success? And then I was like, think about it. I was like, no, that's not true success, right? And the same wise, you could be in a great health, you have a lot of money, but if your relationships are a mess, you can't even get along with people. Is that really success? It's not. So then now the way I define it is success is, achieving success in all areas of your life, health, wealth, love, and happiness. But then more importantly, you being okay personally with where you're at in each of those areas. So not comparing your level of success to somebody else's success. Are you personally happy with where you're at with your finances, with your health, with your relationships, right? And with your own mindset? Then that's when I consider to be true success, when you can sit down with yourself and be truly proud and happy with sort of where you're at or what you've achieved. So, but it should be in harmony, right? All the areas need to be in harmony together, because just having, success in one area, you're still not going to feel successful at the end of the day if it's only one area. So I think that's kind of how I define success. But then people need to not look at it as a destination of, if I get this, then I'm successful, right? It's just a constant goalpost keeps moving ahead. You just got to keep getting better. So every year the goal is just to keep getting better. And if every year at each of those areas, even if I'm 5% better, that's a success for me. So it's just a constant journey and being able to enjoy the journey rather than looking for a destination.
So let's give you a little background on Dr. Astle. She's a professor and chair of the social work department. She's a licensed clinical social worker since 1998 and has over 29 years of micro, meso, and macro social work experience. She is the author of multiple publications, speaks at conferences nationwide and internationally, and maintains a trauma-informed, anti-oppressive private practice and provides anti-racist training and consultation for multiple organizations. Dr. Astle, welcome to the New Wealth Wave podcast. What role do personal environments and community factors play in early shaping one's financial mindset and habits?
They're everything. In the first stage, we're talking about the things that set the stage for who people become, right? So we're talking about culture, how families respond to children's needs, attachment stuff, basic survival stuff. And if we even talk about what created a foundation before that, we're looking at intergenerational or historical trauma. We're looking at epigenetics, all the things that created the soil that build people. And then once they grow, we're talking about family culture, people's individual identities, like who their gender is, who their spirituality is, who their race is, their culture, their ethnicity, their language, all of those, their gender identity, all those pieces. So we're starting to create a mix. And whatever you already have, if you add a little trauma to that, if you add a little anything, it really becomes a matter of, do people fit with their surroundings? Are they treated in a way that's going to make them grow in a healthy way? All of those things are the recipe for the coding that people get psychologically, emotionally, behaviorally. And then if you add finances on top of that, people grow up with an understanding of how money is supposed to be spent. So all of that is built in on the front end. So I don't use the words cultural competence anymore because it's a little bit of an antiquated term, because the idea of cultural competence is that someday we're going to get competent. And the reality is we're not going to get competent ever. So the language I use is culture humility. Like, how do I interact with people at a level that respects and honors where they're at, that centers them rather than my own worldview? But I think the thing that we're talking about is the reality that people have to have a level of cultural humility. They have to have mental health awareness, because the reality is all of this is tied to people's cultures. All of this is tied to their mental health. If you had a parent that had mental health issues, that is activating or dysregulating. If you have mental health issues, which, let's face it, it's 2024, everybody's not right. The world is completely on fire. If people don't have this, their ability to connect, their ability to engage, their ability to collaborate, their ability to provide services and support to communities of color is going to be impacted. I also think that people need to learn how to explicitly communicate. Let me say that again. Explicit communication. You want to go on a vacation? I don't know how much you want to spend on it. No, it's, I have this much in savings. I kind of want to buy some things. Let's talk about what our agreements are around our spending. Let's talk about what our objectives are. I would like to purchase a vacation home. I would like to purchase a home. I would like to buy a new car this year. Let's talk about what you want to, let's negotiate. Do we have an agreement about how much we can spend on our own without talking to the other person? I can't tell you how many people I know who drain each other's bank accounts and never talk about it. That's a betrayal. I know people right now are like, I don't want to tell that person about how much I'm spending. That's my money. Okay, then you need to be single. Because if you're going to be in a relationship and you're moving towards financial well-being or health or wellness, you got to be able to be honest and transparent about what your spending is. So that's a piece. Avoidance is not therapy. That is not therapy. And I realize there's a ton of stigma in Black and brown communities about therapy. I get that. And I get that it is a very Eurocentric practice that people don't feel has cultural relevance. I understand that 100%. There's a lot of different shifting in therapy these days, but I get it. That is a defense mechanism. Avoidance, suppression, denial, those are defenses. The reality is that defenses do a good job of denying or distorting your reality, but to your point, they don't get rid of it. It's right there. So even if you're acting like it's not right there, it's there and it's going to impact your lens.
Future Wealth Builders, I hope you enjoyed those episodes, and I'm glad that you rode the wave with us this year. But guess what? 2025, it's right around the corner, and we're going to come back even better for 2025 in our second year. So stay tuned. As we always say, generational wealth begins with generational knowledge. We'll see you 2025 on the New Wealth Wave podcast.
Thank you for joining us on the New Wealth Wave podcast, hosted by Dr. Joaquin Wallace. Our show is edited and produced by Ray Haycraft. To dive deeper into the world of financial wisdom and learn how to create your financial footprints, head to our website at www.drjwallace.com. For more updates and exclusive content, connect with us on social media by searching Dr. Joaquin Wallace. And if you have questions and comments, feel free to email us at thenewwealthwavepodcast@gmail.com. Remember, generational wealth begins with generational knowledge. And as always, thanks for listening. The content presented in this podcast is strictly for educational purposes and should not be taken as investment advice. The views and opinions expressed by our guests may not necessarily reflect those of the New Wealth Wave podcast and its host or producers. Listeners are urged to exercise discretion and judgment before making any financial or investment decisions. Always consult with a financial professional or advisor before taking any action based on the content of this podcast. If you're enjoying the New Wealth Wave podcast, we appreciate if you leave us a review. We're always open to topic suggestions and guest recommendations. Feel free to reach out to us directly with your thoughts and feedback. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the New Wealth Wave podcast.